Welcome to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. In recent years, we could draw the line between the left and the right in very different ways depending on geography. In Europe, it seems to have been drawn between pro-immigration and anti-immigration, as well as around the positions regarding the green agenda. In the US, it was a combination of positions around immigration, identity politics, and the prioritization between foreign and domestic focus, among other issues. Historically in Israel, those lines are drawn between the people who support the two states delusion and those who object it. Economically speaking, the majority of the Knesset, at least since the 90s, seem to be more or less in a similar place. Unfortunately, not yet fully immune to socialism, but practical as they allow the market to operate semi-freely. I spent some time thinking about this divide in recent years, and more so in recent weeks, as talks of elections are back in the news. If I was a betting man, I'd lean towards the assumption that the elections will take place close to their scheduled time, in the final third of 2026. There are no indications that we're in a rush to go into an election cycle with some critical work left to be done and a fairly stable majority for the government. It's true that the cycle started unofficially, which is evident in the way the public debate is conducted, both by the media as well as the politicians. The politicians now answer questions when they do so, that is, in a "this is why you should vote for us" or "this is why you shouldn't vote for them" terms, rather than really addressing the question at hand. Signs are up on buses and other places for a while, and incredible amounts of money are reportedly being poured, obviously more on the opposition side, on campaigns, even though elections were not officially announced. And so, I find myself trying to draw the political map again, and explaining to myself first and foremost, where are the lines drawn? The bottom line remains as it was when I wrote the State of the State series almost a year ago. The country is divided on the most superficial level at pro-Bibi versus anti-Bibi. My opinion also remains the same, meaning this superficial divide leads to superficial analysis, which drives superficial actions that do not move the country forward in a positive direction. When one takes the time to understand what every candidate and party represents, one must come to some conclusions. My first conclusion is that there are way too many parties. What is the real fundamental difference between the group of parties that define themselves as center but are actually left? What is the difference between Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid, Bennett's unnamed party, Avigdor Lieberman's party, Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot? This is a group of parties that seem to be looking for people with no real positions about any of the core values, or about any of the issues we're facing. Their stated policies are fluffy cliches stated with mock passion at best. Here today, gone tomorrow. Anywhere the wind blows. Let's all be friends, equality, compassion. Hey, look, here's some free stuff. The second conclusion I came to is that the boycott game is still on. The self-proclaimed centrists who are actually leftists continue to boycott Netanyahu. It's true that Benny Gantz is presenting a new stance that includes the possibility of sitting in the same coalition with Netanyahu, but he is declaring, he and his two projected mandates that is, that Ben Gvir and Smotrich are out of the question. So, from his perspective, one boycott ends and a new one begins. Why? Well, we're going to look at this as part of what this episode will try to answer. But first, let's get back to the original question. What separates left from right in Israeli politics? Well, it's not the economy, not really. It's no longer the two-states delusion with the exception of the extreme left. After October 7th, more and more people finally realized that our peace partners are not interested in two states, but only one, for themselves, instead of ours. We don't have the luxury here in Israel to have elections centered around green energy, though Israel produces quite a bit of it, or abortion rights. There are a couple of topics that are being manipulated by the opposition, like the draft of the ultra-Orthodox to the army, or the stubborn insistence on an investigative committee for the October 7th disaster appointed only by the President of the Supreme Court. Those are not fundamental ideological lines, though. Those are policies or agendas or interests. Had the opposition seen better subjects to latch on, the discussion would be around those other subjects. I came to the conclusion, partly by myself and partly by listening to some great analysis from interesting people, that the line is now drawn between two fundamental, monumental, if you will, positions. It took only 78 years, but we're here. We're at the point where we have two camps, the Zionist and the post-Zionist. Now, I use the term post-Zionist very graciously, because some of the people inhabiting this sphere are way worse. On the center-right and onwards, there is a number of parties that have different positions on n number of topics, but fundamentally agree on two major things. One, Israel is a Jewish democratic state and should remain so. And two, Zionism is not a term of the past and will forever remain relevant as a guiding principle. As we know, there's an attempt, especially by anti-Semites, to separate Zionism from Judaism. Those terms are tightly related and inseparable, as the whole purpose of Zionism is to protect and ensure the continuity of the Jewish nation. We're talking about Likud, Netanyahu's party, the bloc represented by Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, and to some extent Shas, led by Aryeh Deri. Other Orthodox parties, such as Yahadut HaTorah, agree on the first point, but Zionism is not central in their beliefs. This represents the right wing, as the Orthodox parties will find it difficult to align with the leftist bloc for reasons that will become very apparent shortly. Again, the center-left and thereafter claim that they respect the Jewish tradition, and they absolutely insist that they are staunch Zionists. Yair Golan, for example, claims he's a bigger Zionist than Ben-Gvir. However, I'd like to take a few minutes to review how these statements translate or not into actions and policies. In the 2 years that preceded the October 7th attack by Hamas, we witnessed a curious occurrence in Tel Aviv. You know, the Bastille of democracy in Israel, as they love to portray it. Yom Kippur, the holiest of the holy, people dressed in white as the custom goes gather in a public square to pray. Around them, a crowd of supposed Jews with drums and bullhorns, making extreme noise, pushing and shoving, doing their best to obstruct. Why is that? You would think that such things could only happen anywhere but the land of the Jews, wouldn't you? So why are these bullies, and mind you, self-proclaimed Jews, doing their best to interfere with the prayer? Well, it's because men and women pray separately. Meaning they pray at the same time, reciting the same texts, performing the exact same religious duties. Only they do it while men are on one side and women are on the other side of a white sheet that separates the crowd. In Tel Aviv, you know, they live in 2026, not in the days of King David. They are progressives, liberals. They can't stand aside as the patriarchy oppresses women. Right. Let us talk about another occurrence. There were a few cases where a female singer was brought to sing to soldiers on a social event or during some R&R. Some, not all mind you, religious soldiers left the premises for the duration of that performance. They did not shout, they didn't raise any signs or make a fuss. They left. For days following these occurrences, the media was busy with the shaming of said singer. How dare they leave? Just because some old dude in the Bible said that men should not be listening to female singing? That means that soldiers are allowed to insult her by leaving quietly? More recently, our new head of Shin Bet, David Zini, who is a kippah-wearing, God-fearing individual, raised hell in our leftist media circles. And the politicians from our loony leftist wing joined the choir in condemning his despicable behavior. See, most religious Jews will not make physical contact with any woman who are not their wife or daughter. In many cases, less religious or secular women will reach out to shake a hand or even offer a hug, and that may result in an awkward moment, when the religious man who is on the other side of this social interaction would shy away or try to politely reject the physical gesture. David Zini was appointed as the head of an organization made of men and women. Having thought about this ahead of time, the head of Shin Bet made an announcement via an email that leaked to the press, of course, that due to his religious beliefs, he would respectfully decline handshakes, etc. What a heartless, inhumane, old-fashioned misogynist. These are but a small fraction of things that happened and still do in the land of the Jews. Why did those bullies in Tel Aviv do it? Why were they disrupting a prayer on Yom Kippur? Why did the media spend hours denouncing soldiers who left the concert without protest? Why are the media and the leftist politicians crucifying David Zini for respectfully declining physical contact with women he is not married to? These thugs in Tel Aviv, they never interfered with Muslims praying in public. Every day and every Friday, and especially during Ramadan, you can see them in the park praying, worshipping freely. Why are they allowed to do so with no demonstration? They also pray separately, so why can't Jews? Well, the simple truth is that these thugs are not really outraged by the separation of men and women. They are outraged by the public display of Judaism. Why did the media and the leftist politicians raise such a stink about soldiers leaving a concert, or about the head of Shin Bet avoiding female handshakes? Not because of the patriarchy, I can tell you that much. Not because they care about the feeling of a singer they'd crucify in a heartbeat had they found out something click-worthy about her. They cannot stomach people who follow religious tenets, even when these people are doing so while making every possible effort to be respectful. The very same crowd of finger-waving, pretentious hypocrites preach individual rights from every rooftop. They are democratic. Hell, they even call their leading party the Democrats. But hey, you should know this by now. Democracy is only good when it works in their favor, and never when it grants people like David Zini any rights. Why is it offensive when a person who believes in all his heart that avoiding physical contact with women is his own way of respecting the most important woman of his life, his wife, declines to touch other women? You don't share his view? Fine, but he does. Why are his rights thrown aside with such ease? Let's talk about a few more items and then we'll try to wrap a nice red ribbon on the episode with some conclusions. Well, the obvious point to be raised, and I won't spend much time on it now, is the two states delusion. If you support this delusion, you've really lost the privilege of calling yourself a Zionist. Not only because you're willing to hand over land from the tiny speck allocated to Jews among the 20-plus Arab countries around it, but you're also inherently endangering the tinier partial speck that remains. There is nothing Zionistic about it. Furthermore, there are swaths of lands in the Negev in the south of the country and in the Galilee up in the north that's waiting for Jewish settlement for years now. In Judea and Samaria, at least in what we call Area C, Bezalel Smotrich has done a terrific job unfreezing construction and settlement, both legal and super moral. There were and are plans to do more in the two regions I mentioned above, and only the Supreme Court, the completely not leftist institute, has made a point of blocking the establishment of new Jewish settlements. In essence, it declared the end of Zionism. Arab settlements, by the way, do not face the same decision, and indeed they grow. Don't get me wrong, they have rights and I'm not here to take any of them away. I'm here asking, why can't Jews? Why can't Jews build Jewish settlements within the consensus borders of the Jewish state? Alright, it seems like I've been a little bit all over the place, but I really wasn't. It's all connected, and now we'll connect the dots. And hey, we'll even answer the original question. Remember? What separates left from right in Israel? The center-right and religious parties are aligned behind the idea of the Jewish and democratic state. For the most part, this bloc is the Zionist bloc that supports the continuous building and development of the Jewish state. They don't only talk about it, they do it. Far from enough, but they do. The center-left and the Arab parties share some of the political views, but allow me to focus on the left and exclude the Arab parties for the time being, as the discussion is around Judaism and Zionism. The Arab parties are on the left, pretty much for similar reasons as any leftist party in the West. For the most part, they are socialists or communists and believe in some of the same nonsense as, say, the Democrats in the US, etc. What about other parties? What about the ones who call themselves Zionists, who claim to have great respect for the Jewish tradition? As Jews, we're forbidden from discussing God's essence, God's identity such that one exists. We are finite people, and God is infinite. As such, we cannot comprehend infinity, nor contain it. So how do we know God? We say, we know you by your deeds. Now, I don't know the thoughts of Yair Golan or Naftali Bennett. I don't have a psychic link with Yair Lapid or Avigdor Lieberman. I do know, however, what these guys are promoting, what they object to, and what seems to bother them. Based on this, I can conclude that they represent the portion of the population who want one thing. The thing is what separates left from right in Israel at this time and has been for a while. The left in Israel wants one thing: to be like all nations. They are tired. They no longer have the fortitude to be slightly different. They are tired of not being invited to every party. Why, oh why do we have to be Jews? That is the underlying sentiment. If only we could have been just like everybody else. And what is that exactly? Are Croats the same as Irish? Are the Irish the same as Canadians? I'm not talking about better, I'm talking about different. Allow me to quote a part of Israel's Declaration of Independence. Eretz Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here, their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here they first attained to statehood, created cultural values of national and universal significance, and gave to the world the eternal book of books. After being forcibly exiled from their land, the people kept faith with it throughout their dispersion and never ceased to pray and hope for the return to it and for the restoration in it of their political freedom. Impelled by this historic and traditional attachment, Jews strove in every successive generation to re-establish themselves in the ancient homeland. In recent decades, they returned to in their masses. Pioneers, Ma'apilim, and defenders, they made deserts bloom, revived the Hebrew language, built villages and towns, and created a thriving community controlling its own economy and culture, loving peace but knowing how to defend itself, bringing the blessings of progress to all the country's inhabitants and aspiring towards independent nationhood. In the year 5657, at the summons of the spiritual father of the Jewish state, Theodor Herzl, the First Zionist Congress convened and proclaimed the right of the Jewish people to national rebirth in its own country. I read this to provide but a glimpse into the spirit of the text, its theme. It seems that there is a portion in our nation who forgot or want to forget why we're here. These are the people who just want to live and let live, not live as Jews and let live. So stop bothering us with your prayers. Stop showing your Jewishness with your tefillin and your kippah. Stop behaving like such Jews. Time to update your Torah to fit our progressive agendas, so we will be allowed at parties around the world. Furthermore, stop insisting on strengthening the country. It only pisses off the nations, and they won't let us into Roger Waters' concerts. Well, not unless we pledge allegiance to the opposition of the evil Zionism. We don't want the complications that come attached to our religion. Leave us alone already with your mitzvahs. This is what they are saying by their actions. Hey, it wasn't me. It was David Ben-Gurion, not exactly Ben-Gvir. He was the one who said, the state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all of its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the prophets of Israel. He and the mostly lefty Uniparty members who signed on the text that reads, the people's administration shall be the provisional government of the Jewish state to be called Israel. Note, the Jewish state. The left keeps harping on the term democracy, and yes, Israel is a democracy. But it is not just another democracy. The state was declared as a Jewish state, and while it mentions that it will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex, that it will guarantee freedom of religion, conscious language, education, and culture, it will safeguard the holy places of all religion, the word democracy doesn't appear in it once. Israel, therefore, was established as a Jewish democratic state. The left wanted to be a democratic state in which Jews can live. Well, that's pretty much any Western country. See the difference? What separates the left from right in Israel, underneath all of the distractions, is the desire of the left to ditch the Zionist guiding principle that Israel is a Jewish state which must not only remain so, but continue to thrive and be developed. For the right, this is a source of pride. Pride in continuing the work of, as Ben-Gurion says, our prophets. Pride in practicing the religion our forefathers fought to preserve. Pride in being different in that regard while practicing the only democracy in the Middle East and participating in global arenas. There is a ton of words yet to be said about the topic, and I will venture to say them, but that will be in another episode. If you feel like sharing, liking, subscribing, or even pledging via Ko-fi, it would really help the podcast increase its reach. And regardless, thank you for listening to this episode of the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. God bless.